Hi everyone, welcome back to Steel Rhino. I'm Mike, and in this episode I'll be showing you how I've pulled apart the trailer, how I found out there was so many issues with the stuff that I had to do. So basically all of the bushings were all gone in the leaf springs. As soon as I started taking apart the axle and the leaf springs, they just fell apart, like parts had rusted. The axle was actually too far forward by about 20 mil and 15 mil too far over one side. So that's why I looked into it to start off with. The actual pods that the springs sat in actually sat higher than the frame itself, which wouldn't have worked with this decking that I'm putting on behind me. So what I've done is I've just stripped everything down. I've white brushed, sanded everything back down. I've used CRC rust converter, which is just basically paint it on and it just turns the rust into a hard primer, which stops it from rusting later on down the line, and I can just paint these straight away, which is what I'm going to do. Do the springs all black, and then the actual springs here red. Then I'm going to bolt them all back together and make up some new clamps that hold the springs together, and hopefully fit them all back in. And then I'll be putting some more bits of flat bar across the front ready to get this cut and mounted on in the not so distant future. So let's get into it. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm just undoing and pulling all of the old dry, nearly rotten like planks off. You'll see how easy they just pull apart, like I literally just pulled them off. So I'm just getting rid of all of that so I can see what I'm working with underneath and how good the frame is. And then once I get all of the wood off, I just go around and take out any screws and bolts and stuff that are just sticking up out the way, just to give me a nice flat surface to start working with. So now I'm just gonna give it a jet wash down and just get all of the years of dirt and grime that gets collected inside the frame from being an old farm trailer. Just to get everything off and all the loose paint, just everything, just to give me a nice kind of blank canvas, just to start working everything I need to out. So now, after having a closer look, you can see that the two pods that hold the coil springs are actually sitting higher than the chassis itself, and that the axle was actually a lot higher on one side than the other. So I'm going to have to sort that out later on. I'm just going to end up taking all of it out and redoing everything just to make sure that I've got the wheel alignment correct and that I'm not just dragging it one way. So I'm just wire brushing the frame down now just to get all of the rust, surface rust, all of the bits of paint that are flaking off, just so I have clean surfaces to weld to, that there's just no ugly bits of old weld and bolts and all that kind of stuff just sticking out everywhere. Now I'm cutting the parts for the extension, because the bit of decking board that I've got is actually wider than the chassis frame itself, so I'm just cutting these small bits of channel off just to extend it out, and trying to get them as level as I can, but it's hard work when the whole frame is slightly warped, but that's what you get for buying second-hand trailers. It's probably been through the works on the farm, carrying loads of bales of hay up and down rough roads, so you've got to kind of expect it. On to the next day. So now I've got all of the extensions all welded on. It's time to delve into this suspension and just see exactly how bad it is. So I'm not happy with how wonky it was sitting, and it just needed to come off just to give me peace of mind when I'm towing it down the road, that it's not gonna fall apart and try and go off on me. But one thing I wasn't expecting is when I took the leaf springs apart for them to actually just disintegrate and fall apart. The centre bolts holding all the leaves together was actually just completely rusted through. And the other annoying thing was that all of the bolts and everything holding the suspension on were completely welded. So I've had to grind all of that back just be able to knock the pins and stuff out, to drop the springs, to get in there to fix it now and actually move it across. So when I actually tried to get the U-bolts off of the axle itself, they had just corroded in, and as soon as I tried to undo the nuts, they just spun, stripped the threads, and I've actually had to go in there with a disc cutter and just disc cut them completely off. I'm going to put new U-bolts on and slightly change the layout of the plates it connects to in a later video. One thing I was surprised on this though is that the bearings and everything seemed amazing. There was no play, so they'll just be perfect just to re-grease, pop the wheels back on and good to go. So eventually, after some cutting, grinding, knocking the corroded bolts and everything off, eventually I got the whole thing to come down, as you can see in the video. Popped both the springs out, and it took a lot longer than I was expecting, but we got there in the end. They'd actually plug welded the bolt in this front hanger, and the only way that I could get it out, I could have drilled it out, but it would have taken some time, so the only way is just slide a little disc up inside, try and cut the bolt out, and then knock the bolt out of the spring itself once I removed it. So now here I am getting the pods, I guess you call them, out that were holding the actual coil springs in. So I'm just going to remove these out, and I'll put them back on at a later time when I've got all of the axle and the new leaf springs fitted in, everything's square, and then I'll sit the springs on the axle, and then I'll work out the new location of the pods, and I'll fabricate some new plates and weld them in. Now I'm just going around and fully welding all of the extension channels that I've put on, now that I'm happy with where they're positioned. So I've just cut some bits of tubing that I'm now going to weld between the pieces of angle I've put on, and they're going to be where the strops and everything, the tie down points for the loads I'm carrying will go. Once the deck's all on, they'll just go around the side and tie underneath, keep the load safe. So now I'm going to tackle these leaf springs. I'm going to reuse them because they'll be okay once I've refurbished them. So I'm just going to sand them all back, get all of the loose dirt off, and then use that CRC rust converter that you can see, and leave it overnight. It takes 24 hours to cure, but that's going to turn all of the rust into a nice primer. And then I paint them once that was all dry. Paint them black and then reassemble them, and I'm quite happy with how they turned out. And they'll be going back on once I've cleaned up the axle and got that painted as well. So thank you for watching. I know this one wasn't too exciting, but I've got to get this ready before I delve further into my second go-kart, because I need something to transport my other go-kart around. So thanks for watching. Can you click a like and subscribe if you like what you see? If you've got anything you'd like to see me do more or improve on, then just let me know. But other than that, thank you for watching.